Hello and welcome to week 11. Oh my goodness. This week we're going to talk about the eyes and ears and all of the terminology that attaches with those body systems. Interestingly, the optic system is the most complex body system in the entire human body. It includes the orbit, the conjunctiva, the cornea, the sclera, the iris, the lens, the retina, and more. So let's take a look. You can see here in this illustration how each part of the eye has its own term, ergo medical terminology. Okay, and the fact is it is a very complex system. In order to get that picture of whatever it is you're seeing, and then travels through the eye, through the optic nerve into the brain, so your brain can then interpret it. The eye itself consists of the eyeball, the optic nerves, the extraocular muscles, the cranial muscle nerves, the blood vessels, of course, because that's what feeds all the tissue, the orbital adipose, which is fat, and the lacrimal system, which is how you cry. Very important. Okay, so the computer is thinking about whether or not it wants to go to the next slide. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. What are we going to talk about? Round and round and round. Oh, we're going to talk about the sclera. The sclera is a protective layer of the eyeball. It's the dense white fibrous layer of tissue that you can see, right? Okay. The anterior, remember, anterior in medical terminology is the front. So the front of the eyeball is where the sclera meets the cornea. And you may have heard about cornea, as in cornea transplant, when people have cataracts. Okay. This meeting point is also known as the limbus or the corneoscleral junction. Now, corneoscleral is what you're used to or getting used to in medical terminology, right? Because it's the combination term, corneo for cornea, sclera for sclera. Okay, that's pretty easy. But then, just to keep us on our toes, those geniuses that created this language decided to give it another name, the limbus. Okay, so as the sclera comes around the back of the eyeball, posteriorly back, right? It meets the dural sheath, which is also known as the lamina cribrosa of the optic nerve. So that's where the images that you're taking in are getting then ready to be sent through the optic nerve into the brain for interpretation. The portion of the sclera at the medial anterior. So you remember what that means? Anterior is front, medial is in the middle of the aspect of the eyeball called the cornea. We just discussed that, right? Curved, multi-layer, transparent, and avascular segment. So you remember, A is the prefix that means no, vascular. So there are no veins or arteries, no vessels in this portion of the eye, okay? And the layers of the cornea are names that you will need to, or you should become familiar with, right? The epithelium, the Bowman's membrane, stroma, Descement's membrane, and the endothelium. Remember, epi, endo, right? Sensory nerves. The posterior surface of the cornea is coated in aqueous, watery humor that keeps intraocular pressure at a consistent volume and rate of outflow. And if you've ever had a glaucoma test, you know, when you go to the eye doctor and they put that puff of air excuse me, into your eye, that's what they're checking for. They're checking for the consistent volume and rate of outflow, because that's what glaucoma is. Glaucoma is too much pressure there at the back of the cornea, and that causes problems. If you remember when we talked about the cardiovascular system, we talked about blood pressure, right? You're familiar with blood pressure and high blood pressure. And the reason that high blood pressure is such a problem is because when you think of it like water going through your pipes in your house, right? If it's too much pressure, when you turn on the faucet, it's going to break the dishes in the sink. And it also destroys the piping and all of the junctures throughout. So the same thing happens in your body with high blood pressure, and the same thing happens with your cornea, which is why this is such an important concern. Okay, the uvual tract. Now we're in the middle layer of the eye, just inferior to the sclera. Remember, inferior is below, okay? The anterior in the front is the iris. You've heard of the iris, right? And the cilial body. And in the posterior, the back, is the choroid. The iris is the color portion that surrounds the pupil of your eye. So when you look in the mirror and you see my beautiful blue eyes, or your beautiful brown eyes, or your beautiful green eyes, you're looking at the iris, okay? And the pupil is the black part in the middle that controls the amount of light entering. So you know, when you are in a dark space or darkened space, your pupil will enlarge, right? So the black part of your eye gets bigger to allow more light, okay? Whereas if you're in a very bright space, like out in the sun without sunglasses, your pupils will get teeny tiny to try and limit and control the amount of light going into the eye. And by the way, you should never be out in the sunlight without sunglasses on, because that's how you get cataracts. Well, one of the ways, but it will promote cataracts. You don't want that. Nopey, nopey, nopey. Okay. All right. The retina is in the back, in the area of the eye. That's where your nerve endings are, responsible for receiving visual images and then sending these images to the brain for analysis. So the retina is like control central of your optic system. Okay. As they come in, the images come in, the retina like coordinates and then sends them up through the optic nerve into the brain for analysis. This is very important. And this part in this area is where your rods and cones are. And the rods and cones part of the eye is what helps you identify color. So you have one type of cone reacts to red, one to blue violet, and a third to green. So this is where something may go wrong if somebody is colorblind. But what I find is really incredible is, have you ever gone to like Home Depot or Lowe's and you're trying to pick out paint and you look at this big wall with 40 gazillion different shades of white, right? But your eyes can only designate up to 150 shades, technically. But somehow you still can tell the difference between these subtle groups and shades of color. Interesting, isn't it? I think it's interesting. Okay, but then again, I think learning new things is always interesting. All right, now you have the lens of the eye, located at the anterior of the vitreous chamber. Anterior, the front of the vitreous chamber, and that's that big white part of your eyeball. Isn't that weird? Okay. And, you know, a lot of people think that the lens is right here, the front. where you might put a contact lens, okay? But it's not. The lens of the eye is actually in the middle, all right? So the lens goes through what is called accommodation, and this is what we were referring to before about the eye changing shape and actually managing the images, the clarity of what is going on. So accommodation is the way the lens changes shape to see far away objects or close objects. So when your eye, excuse me, when somebody is diagnosed as nearsighted, it is actually a designation that the eye no longer refocuses, refocuses, okay? Because that's what it will do to see far, to see near. So it kind of gets stuck in one position, and then you're nearsighted, which means I can only see near, which means I need to wear glasses to see something far away with clarity, right? Or the opposite, if I'm farsighted, I can only see things far away, and I have trouble seeing things close up with clarity, which are those people who need reading glasses, okay? They need something to get that close-up image that you would have on a printed page to be able to see that clearly. And the other note is, like, for example, these glasses that I'm wearing, these do not have prescription at all. These are my computer glasses, and they have a special coating on the lens to accommodate for the glare and the light coming off of the computer. And they help me be on the computer longer without my eyes getting tired and watery. Interesting, huh? I think it's interesting. All right, so the vitreous chamber is that big white part. Let me just show it to you right again real quick. See, this is the vitreous chamber, this yellow part in this illustration, okay? You see the lens, the pupil is right in front of it, okay? And this is the vitreous chamber, is really the bulk of your eyeball. Okay, so this is called the vitreous chamber because it consists of 99% water and 1% insoluble protein. Now, if you've ever watched any crime shows or TV shows, CSI, or anywhere where there's likely to be a dead body and a medical examiner, sometimes they will look at the eyes of the dead person and they will be able to tell approximately how long the person has been dead because of the vitreous chamber will lose water from the lack of circulation. And because when you're dead, you know, it evaporates, okay? So this is how the eye refracts light rays. It also provides the shape of the eyeball because it is the ball per se, okay? Oops, no, okay, wait. I'm doing my medical terminology, sorry, bye. Okay, so I hit the wrong button. Okay, so now you know how you see, although it is really complicated, isn't it? I mean, you wouldn't think so, but it is. Okay, so now let's talk quickly about the ears, the auditory system. And interestingly, especially in comparison to the optic system, the auditory system is very, very simple. It has three basic parts. There's the external ear, the pinna or helix, which is this out part of your ear, this part of your ear, right? Where your earlobe is, where you put your pretty earrings, okay? And it is shaped like a cup or conically, like a cone, all right, so that it can capture sound and then funnel it into the external auditory canal. Oliver, shh, shh. Mommy's talking. Mommy's teaching. It's important. Sorry. Okay, so then the sound is captured and is funneled through the external acoustic meatus, more commonly known as the ear canal. Okay, then we get to the tympanic membrane, which is the eardrum, which is kind of that doorway into the middle ear. And the eardrum, just like a drum, is a membrane, and it creates vibrations from the sound as it's coming through your external ear canal. And then it moves that sound into the middle ear, which have the 3 smallest bones in the body. Now, if you remember when we were talking about the skeletal system a few weeks ago, we were talking about how the femur is the largest and strongest bone in the entire human body. And here we have the exact opposite. We have the incus, the malleus, and the stapes. These are 3 teeny tiny little bones that have been found and are so protected in the middle ear, by the way, that they have found that if someone falls off of the top of a very tall building and breaks every bone in their body, it's not an accurate statement, because almost always the malleus, the incus, and the stapes are intact. So if you jump off a tall building, you're not going to break every bone in your body. You're only going to break 203 out of 206. Okay, but now the vibrations go through there. The malleus is like a hammer. The incus then transfers to the stapes, which looks just like a stirrup, which is the other word for it, stirrup. It looks just like a stirrup if you know anybody who does horseback riding. All right, and now we get into the inner ear, where the sound then goes through the semicircular canals and into the cochlear nerve and the vestibular nerve. Okay. And then that is going through, connects directly to the acoustic nerve, which is the 8th cranial nerve. So the sound then goes directly into your brain again, so your brain can interpret what that is. Okay. Piece of cake, right? Look at that whole thing in one illustration. But we got the whole eye in one illustration too, and that is way more complicated. Okay. For those of you who may have allergies, you're probably very familiar with your eustachian tube, which, as you can see, is attached to the middle ear. Okay, a lot of new terms for you to learn, as well as reinforcing your knowledge of anatomy, because this is so important. Whatever your future role will be as a healthcare professional, these are all terms you must become familiar with. And remember, my favorite part of learning medical terminology is the fact that at any point in time, at some point, you are going to be a patient or the loved one of a patient attending a healthcare adventure. Okay. And this is going to help you better understand what is going on with the situation and better work with your physician to be a functional and active member of your healthcare team. So remember to review this often. I don't believe in memorization, because you bring it in, you hold it for the test, and then you dump it. Okay. Review it, review it, review it. Use your medical dictionary until you know what that is. And always query when necessary. It is a federal law that you have to query, not in class. In class, it's just smart to query me, your wonderful instructor, right? Okay. And remember, we have a medical terminology tutor available for you. So just contact Monisha, make an appointment if you have any questions, and or email me, because I'm always here to help you. I'm always here to support you, and I want to help you be successful. Okay? Okay.